We lost $7 million in that first startup I did. I saw this kind of sparkle in their eye. I wanted that spark. Like, how do you get that? I'm now able to survive any challenge that's given to me because I'm just fully present. Your story is the one thing that cannot be replicated.
Okay, so I have your bio over there in my file of bios, and like interviewing you, Lyn Graft, I don't know how to say what you do because you have done so many things. You are a co-creator and a chief creative officer for Shared Snacks. You have been behind thousands of stories and interviews with leading edge, big name entrepreneurs. For years, you've been doing this. You make films. You are an exquisite interviewer. I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with you a few times. And so, before we jump into the things that you know about entrepreneurs, I want to talk about your journey, right? Because it's been LA, Austin, New Mexico, all over the world, all over the country, telling stories. So talk to us about your journey as a solopreneur.
Part of that journey kind of evolved out of figuring out what I wanted to do in life. And I distinctly remember in high school, I chose engineering because I was good in math. And it just seems it's an arbitrary way.
You're good at math?
Yeah, I was really good at math. I was like one of my strongest subjects, terrible at English, really good at math. And that arbitrary conclusion I should be an engineer because of that set me down this path. And it wasn't until I'm sitting in my engineering cubicle, working on the manufacturing line, that I had this realization, like, I don't really like this. I don't like being secluded, whether I'm in my cubicle or just by myself trying to solve a problem. The work was, in challenging, but I needed that external stimulus. I wanted to be around people. It wasn't something I knew was long-term. And very quickly, after 2 years being an engineer, quit my job and moved to the mountains, become a ski instructor. And it was that kind of early catalyst towards listening, putting my ear to the ground on what my own calling was, that has allowed me to kind of find my way, and still kind of finding my way, but always being open to what the winds were suggesting. And I remember specifically, I sold all my belongings. I bought a Subaru with a ski rack.
A Subaru. You went full bore on the whole thing. Total commitment.
Full bore. Got it all. It was the only car I've ever owned. It had pneumatic shocks. You could raise it 6 inches for heavy snow conditions. It was crazy. And I went to the mountains, and I was going to work at Vail versus Keystone. And the reason I chose Keystone, and I didn't like the Frenchy kind of uppity attitude that Vail has.
Snooty,
really snooty. So I ended up going to Keystone and A-Base. And I'll tell you, one of the most interesting things about that is, like, everybody loves the fact that, oh man, you got to be a ski instructor, and it was a lot of fun. You don't make any money, but it was a very rewarding. You're outside, you're skiing. But it was those lift rides of 20 minutes and 30 minutes with all these unique individuals, and specifically these business owners. They were like driven, hardcore individuals. They were there just there for the weekend, or they're with their family, whatever. And they were just so excited about what they were doing. And they were really excited to get back. And I saw that difference between the corporate world, the people weren't that excited about it, and the people that were. So that
is so interesting. So it's like, your philosophy and approach to creating, which is what you do every single day, is based on like these, casual conversations on a chairlift. I mean, that is powerful. Like the people who have that passion and that love to get back to what they're doing. And we've all been in, that position of not even wanting to go back. And so what was it about that where you're like, I can't do corporate? Like, what was that aha moment?
The reason I left the corporate world came down to kind of two things. One, I knew it wasn't the right path for me. I just kind of knew that instinctively after a couple of years. I'm like, I can't do this long term. But the second, as I listened to these people on the lifts and heard them, and I saw this kind of sparkle in their eye. And I'm like, I wanted that spark. Like, how do you get that? And it wasn't just about they were doing interesting work. They kind of owned their own business. They chose and determined their own destiny. And that ability to kind of listen to them was a key early ingredient for being a successful storyteller, was being able to listen and understand what was calling me and then be able to articulate back to myself or to other people. And it's just one of those skills I think we don't really focus on enough, the ability to sit here and listen, digest before you interpret what you do with that or how you communicate back to them.
Right. So, okay. So after you left your ski instructor position, which sounds totally rad, and I would like to be doing that right now. Where did you go? Like when you make that decision, what is the next step? Because I've interviewed a lot of people recently talking about, just starting is sometimes the very hardest thing for entrepreneurs and startups to do. The first step, just going for it,
For me, at that time, it was supposed to be just a year excursion and then go to grad school, get my MBA.
Okay.
But I loved it so much, met a girl, and we ended up living in both of our cars for about a year. We would live in her car because she lived in Minnesota. We did the Midwest with her, and then I was from New Mexico. We did the West in my car. And then we broke up. It was the best breakup ever. We just said, are we done? Yeah, we're done. So I hitched a ride back, got to my car. And then I ended up continuing the journey, going to Tahoe, become a ski instructor there, and said, okay, I'm going to get serious, started looking at schools. And I got drawn to Austin and the Texas MBA program because they have this really strong entrepreneurial community. And it was a small town with a lot of just panache to it. Just a lot of keep Austin weird, the music scene, just an incredible creativity here. And there's a lot, it was an early stage startup scene at the time. And I decided I'm gonna get my MBA here at Texas. And that was kind of the next step in the journey. And one of the primary reasons I chose Texas is because they had a lot of adjunct professors that were teaching. These are very successful entrepreneurs that didn't have to teach, all millionaires that would just teach one class a year.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to take them, and I wanted to be around these founders, not to go back in the corporate world, but I want to figure out what I wanted to do as the next step. Because I wasn't quite sure. I just knew I wanted to own a business one day, but not knowing what that was.
So once you got your MBA, and like we'll come back to the whole MBA conundrum for entrepreneurs, because there's you got to have it, and no, screw that, go study art history and speak Italian. Where did that MBA get you? All right, so you're done with engineering, right? The math part, blah. How did you make the pivot from business school management, case studies into a content creator, right? Where is that along your journey?
Well, there was one other kind of journey within that journey, and that was when I was at Texas. We had a really strong technology infrastructure in Austin because of Dell, IBM, a lot of those and there's a lot of startups that were starting to kind of bubble up. And I remember specifically, I had an opportunity to work for Sabre, American Airlines Sabre, the reservation system, worked for them, and just confirmed I didn't want to go back. But I did work for them for a period of time as I found what the next step was. And my best friend Ingrid said, I take that back. Before I did that, there was a startup I found here that was doing HTML conversion software. And this was in the 90s. So people didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah, that's pretty vanguard.
So the web was kind of starting, and I'm like, okay. And it was a startup. I could either go to Silicon Valley or here, wanted to stay in Austin. And I did that for 2 years. And that was a true technology, became an enterprise software, if you will. And then while I'm working for that startup, we went from $100,000 to $2 million in revenue over 2 years. So we were growing quickly, and they didn't want to give me equity. And I was like, I want ownership. I want to be the guy that was one of the founders. And my best friend Ingrid, she reached out. She goes, hey, my dad's got access to this artificial intelligence technology coming out of Oak Ridge National Labs. We're going to start a company. What are you doing? And she knew I wasn't happy, and I jumped in ship with her and did that journey for about 7 years. And Amy, that was kind of one of the craziest journeys ever in my life. It was one of those experiences that had all the elements of a true roller coaster startup experience.
Yeah.
Because we had the highs of raising $7 million, getting featured on Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, and doing all these successful things, getting some great clients, State Farm and CBS Sportsline. Then the .com crash happened, and all of our customers disappeared because we were selling them software. They disappeared, our revenue disappeared, couldn't get that next round of funding, and then we crashed and burned. And we were on the cover of magazines and newspapers because of how high we goes and how low we crash.
Like, let's pause here and talk about the high highs and the low lows, because that is a theme that emerges for a lot of startups. Not just tech. Walk us through like what it's like. Those highs, I think, are the addicting part of startup, but the lows are pretty low too. So talk a little bit about those high highs and the low lows and how you kind of recover, because you ended on a really low low, right? Like, how do you dust it off and say, hey, let's do it again, right?
For sure, because the first one, I truly wore that startup on my sleeve.
Yeah.
And there's a level of ego that is associated with being a founder. It's part of what makes...
And emotion too, right? Like that emotion and the ego can be potentially...
Because it drives you. Because it's a very difficult road. You have to be the biggest fan of your business compared to anybody else in the world. You're always championing whatever you're doing, your product, your service. You're the biggest evangelist. And to do that, you got to have some level of ego, because like, look, I'm doing this. It doesn't exist yet. Give me money so I can go build it, or pay me and trust me it's going to work, or I won't let you down as a service provider. And that level of kind of passion, that desire that I want this to be successful. I want to succeed. I want to see my name in a book or in a magazine or on TV.
Yeah.
In the early stages, I was very driven by a lot of those things, because I'd watched other successful people that had done it. Right. And I want to be like them. I want to be able to chart my own destiny and be known for what I was doing. But then when it crashed, this is where I realized I'm sitting in this. We had this 10,000 square foot office that we'd rented, and we had to let all 32 people go. And I'm by myself, and I'm downloading MP3s, figuring, what the hell am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
And I sat there for hours and days. Days turned into a few weeks. And then finally, I decided 3 things. 1, whatever I do next, I have to enjoy it. 2, I have to be good at it. And 3, I have to make money at it. Right. But I'm not going to be, that won't define who I am. That is not going to be what I'm measured on as a person, how I see myself, or how I care about other people see me. So I was kind of finding my own legs, if you will, as a young man, trying to figure out my path and what I want to do in my life. But that's right. Those 3 criteria still exist today. I'm not going to do anything I don't enjoy, or won't make money at it. And it has helped kind of be my North Star. And it goes back to what you said. How do you get through those difficult times? And for me, I don't even worry about that anymore. I've got this, I don't know, I feel like I'm now able to survive or endure any challenge that's given to me, because I'm just fully present. And there's this one saying I heard about fear. It says, fear really doesn't exist. The only fear that babies are born with is the fear of loud noises. All other fears we develop over time. So as an example, you're not afraid of heights. You're afraid of falling and dying. Right. You're not afraid of love. You're afraid of being left alone or not loved. It's not those things. So it's all about how you position it and your perception and your approach. And that has helped me just stay really in a flow state, if you will. Yeah. And keep that positive.
So hang on. All right. So let's go back, because I think what you just said is hugely important. You named off the 3 things that you knew, right, from this catastrophic nosedive that you took, I mean, and you're not the only one at that time who was in that position. But one of the things that you're talking about, like that ego part, right? The ego thing will bite you in the ass every single time. And what you described to me is, a process of becoming authentic. Right. And authenticity is very trendy right now. Right. Like everybody has to be authentic. Your podcasts have to be authentic. And so, and I think that's true. But defining it, I think, is more challenging. Right. So talk to me about that process of becoming authentic, like you becoming, like, I think closer to what you are now, which I would never describe you as an ego-driven personality, right? Like, what was the process you went through to find that authenticity as a leader, an entrepreneur, a creator?
I would contend that part of the reason I was able to find my own authenticity led to being humbled by my own actions. And it was saying things or doing things that weren't in my own best interest. I was doing it for other people. It wasn't to serve my soul. So because of those mistakes, because of those wrong paths that I took, it led to biting me in the ass, slapping in the face, knocking me down. I remember when we lost.
Sometimes that just needs to happen.
Sometimes it does. I mean, we lost $7 million in that first startup I did. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, I can't pay you back. I'll never be able to pay you back. Or like, that's kind of what I was thinking. And they're all investors like, just how it goes. It's just how the startup, high-tech startup world goes. And it was that humbling experience that being in that 10,000 square foot room by myself, trying to figure out my path. I'm like, I don't want to ever experience that again. And it wasn't like instant, but the path was clear. It was like, don't do that, do this. And one of the things about entrepreneurship, and they never tell you this when you become a business owner. When you have a job, you have a tactical job. Do this, go this direction, and here's our principles, our vision, everything else. When you have your own company, it's like this. You can go any direction, and that's a blessing and a curse. And for me, it was like, okay, let's try to not do that, kind of narrow it down. Like, okay, I'm on the right path. Here's my North Star. Let's keep moving in that direction. Doesn't mean I'll always go there, but it was a revelation that sometimes entrepreneurship is about saying no more so than it is about saying yes.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that like this journey that you have just explained, and taken us through really is laying the foundation for what you have become, which is so much more than, the founder and CEO of something. Like you have become a storyteller, right? That is, and like a storyteller who studied engineering. I mean, that is a wacky combination, right? But your book, right? Like you wrote this book, Start with Story. And the thing, we've had this conversation in the past, Lyn, but it's, the storytelling part of your journey, the story of an entrepreneur, that is the greatest asset that you have as an entrepreneur and as a human, right? That story, it is the essence of what your brand will become, and it is the essence of what kind of leader you will become, right? So talk a little bit about like the whole storytelling component of entrepreneurship, which is so largely ignored, I think, out in the wild. Entrepreneurs are scared of the storyteller. Like it's trendy to be a storyteller, but let's talk about the basics, right? Like what is a story? Like the thousands of entrepreneurs you've interviewed over the years and I've interviewed over the years, like what is the thing, right, that entrepreneurs maybe don't understand about their story and about the telling of their story?
For me, discovering what defined a story was birthed out of being a producer, making television shows for CNBC, videos for Microsoft or South by Southwest. And it was like, I had this opportunity to craft stories for primetime television or for a huge global event for Microsoft. And I was able to figure it out myself, how to take a story, put it into video and make it entertaining and compelling and hit the point. It was something I learned through other people and through the process of doing it. But it was when someone asked me to help them with their own story that it became a whole different animal for me. So here I'd film the founders of LinkedIn and Starbucks and Whole Foods with great stories, but it's one thing to tell a story. It's another one to teach someone else how to tell their own story.
That's so true. Like what? So, people who have a great story, and everyone's got a story, right? Everybody has a core origin story. How do you shake it loose, right? Like, and I think that it kind of goes back to the authenticity thing, right? Like, and people, that's when you tell your story, you're putting it out there, right? You're making yourself vulnerable. So when you're working with startups and like, how do you get to the story?
If I make that connection between when I was trying to figure out how to tell someone or to teach someone, coach them how to create their own story, tell their own story, I immediately started going towards traditional Hollywood and video production books and references. Robert McKee, famous Hollywood writer, he's got a book this thick. He's got 300 credits, Academy Awards, all these things, super famous. And then The Hero's Journey, made famous by Star Wars and Game of Thrones, this journey that everybody go through. And the problem was I was getting lost trying to figure out, understand. The hero's journey is 13 steps. Robert McKee's book is, 300 pages. And I'm like, number one, I was trying to figure it out, understand it myself. Number two, way too much information for any business owner to understand. So I kind of threw all that out the window and said, let me go back to what I know best, and that's founders. And I started watching the tapes, reading the transcripts, digesting all the raw footage that we had done at that point in time. I'm into my career about 7 years. I'm like, I filmed a lot of, let's go figure out how they did it, or ask them. And none of them said, yeah, I didn't take any class, or I didn't worry about the hero's journey, that some didn't know what that was. Robert McKee, none of them knew who that person was. So I'm like, okay, they didn't really have a good answer for me. They were sharing their own journey, if you will. I was sitting talking to one of my really good friends, and she referenced the Starbucks interview, Howard Schultz, one of my favorite storytellers. I went back and I watched this interview, and it was this one story that he shared on camera. And he talked specifically about how he was working for a coffee bean company at the time in San Francisco. It wasn't even Starbucks yet. And he got sent to Milan, Italy. And he's at a kind of a high-tech, if you will, a kitchen appliance, how they make the coffee bean, make espresso. And he's at this conference in Milan. And on the third day, he decides to walk from the conference to his hotel room in the back alleys of Milan. Now, obviously, the back alleys may not sound that, but we're in Milan. This is beautiful. It's romantic. And he describes coming around the corner, and he hears it, and he smells it before he sees it. And then he unveils this espresso bar. He'd never seen that before. There wasn't coffee shops as we know it in the United States at that time. And he's like, he walks up to it, and he sees these two guys. He felt like they were yelling in Italian, but they're just having a conversation. This one guy's reading a book with a beret at the bar, just kind of hanging out there. This other couple's having espressos in this romantic setting, and they're yelling out Il Giornato and the Venti, just these Italian names, and you could smell the aroma. And he was like, oh my God. He flies back to the United States. He tells his partners at the coffee bean company, because look, we got to open these espresso bars. We got to have these shops. It's such a great story. And they're like, we're a coffee bean company. We're not going to open up a diner. And he's like, no, you don't understand. This experience that I had in Italy. And he started retelling that experience. And it was in that moment, Amy, that it came to me. All a story is that you have an experience that has a powerful meaning and relationship to your business in one way, shape, or form. Either it puts you on the path, it was the light bulb moment that triggered you to start it, or it's this emotional reason that you started this company. And it was that germination process of like, I hit that light bulb moment. Okay, I can do that. I can teach someone that. I can ask you about your path. I can ask anyone about what is it that happened to you that caused you to be here right now, starting this company, launching this product, doing these things that has a meaningful relationship. And in that kernel, there's always a spark. There's always something compelling because entrepreneurship is hard. Why would we do this if not something is driving us from this internal driving force? Right. And it was that experience of watching Howard Schultz, hear him talk about how he used that story to launch Starbucks, to raise capital, to take it public, to get press, to hire people.
This is the whole part of the story is your greatest asset, because when I meet resistance, from entrepreneurs and founders, like the whole storytelling thing is utter bullshit, right? Like I'm not, I don't care. I'm not telling a story. It is how you raise funds. It is how you brand. It is how you communicate. It's how you build audience and community. Your story is everything, and your ability to tell that story can separate you from success and failure. It's 6 degrees of separation, and the story is the thing that's going to keep you on the side of success. I mean, I deeply believe that, and sometimes when I'm talking with different founders, like the whole thing where people are like, is bullshit. Like, what's your comeback? Because I know what mine is. I get defensive, right? My whole world is storytelling. What's yours?
Whenever someone tells me that they don't believe a story is important, or they don't understand why they should focus so much energy on it, I always see that as an opportunity to explain to them is that your story is the one thing that cannot be replicated.
Yeah.
That you're the only person on this planet that has the knowledge that you do, the set of experiences that you've acquired over the years, and the network and community you've developed. Not one other person on the entire planet has those three things.
Right.
Even if you had a twin, they wouldn't have the same things that you could talk about.
Yeah.
And in that differentiation, even though we're 99.999% equal DNA-wise, that 0.001% is where all the distinction lies.
Yeah.
And your journey, the ability to articulate why I'm doing what I'm doing, is what sets us apart. So differentiation, the ability to articulate how you're unique from the rest of the other startups out there, cannot be copied simply because you're the only person that has that network, those experiences, and that knowledge in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's also like when you are telling your story, whether you're an entrepreneur or a CEO, whatever, the emotion, right, the connection that you have with your story can only be expressed by you, right? And startups, like who farm out their branding or like that outsource their voice, right? We talk a lot about voice and storytelling. When you outsource that part of who you are doing yourself a huge disservice, don't you think?
Yeah, there's kind of this. I'll reference this quote that I think about. It's not a quote. It's more kind of internalization that I had in learning about your voice, your ability to tap into your own emotions, and it has to do with what I call emotional facts. What that means is, if I say I love my mother, you cannot dispute that.
Right.
You can't tell me how much or how little or if I do or do not love my mother. But for me, I know 100% I love my mother just unbelievably as one of the most important things in my life. So that emotional fact is part of what the founders' uniqueness, that level of differentiation that they have to say, look, I love what I'm doing. I am passionate what I'm doing. Now, the trick is how do you get someone to understand that vision, that passion, and see what you see, feel what you feel, and get them to go there visually, mentally, emotionally. Yeah. So it's like, I want to back this guy. I believe in what you're doing. I want to write about you. I want to tell your story because you got me. You got my juices going. I got my hair's raising because I'm so excited. And that is where those emotional facts come into play because nobody else has that. So if you outsource that to a marketing agency or a writer, a ghostwriter, a freelancer,
you're giving away your thing.
They're not going to be able to do it as well as you do. Now, granted, you still need some writing help if you're not a good writer or you need some copywriting or creative, but you should never give away that full voice. You should be able to exchange it with them, path them, bridge them to it so they'll be able to talk it for you.
Exactly. And can I just tell you a story really quickly because it's one of my favorite stories of a founder who's based in Copenhagen. His name is Lasse Andersen, and he founded this company called Grod, Grod, like totally Danish sounding company. And he, the way he did this is his mother died of cancer and left him $100,000 or 1 billion different kronas or something like that. And it was for him to go to college. And he went into school and he didn't dig it. His passion in life is porridge. He loves porridge, right? Just like porridge. And so he decided to take this money that he inherited and launch a business based on his passion. And so he launched Grod. And Grod has, he's developed all these different flavors of porridge, wildly popular and successful company in Copenhagen. And when he pitched me his story, English is not his first language, right? It didn't need to be at all, zero, because you could feel the emotion of his story because he believed in it so deeply. Like, storytelling is more than just words. It's like the way you interact and behave with whatever it is that you're launching, in your life, whether it's a company or a relationship or whatever. Like this guy, I can't even, like the story, like it's not a huge, like it's a small, startup chain of porridge outfits. But the way he was able to express himself, in what was not his native language was, to me, one of the best stories I have ever heard, just the ability to communicate that fire that you feel for some idea. And so you have taken storytelling to, like multiple levels higher than, like my story about Grode. And it's given you the opportunity to really get inside the psyche of a lot of entrepreneurs. And so, as we're kind of talking through your book, I'm wondering, have you come across themes of successful entrepreneurs you've interviewed? Like, are there themes that link the successful entrepreneurs together?
There's one thing I can definitively say after interviewing over 1,000 entrepreneurs over the years, and this is, for me, it is a universal truth, is there's not one way to do anything.
No.
Because you've got founders of very successful billionaires and incredible, it doesn't matter what industry it is, people that get up at 5 a.m., people that start work at 11 p.m., there are people that have to have their morning routine with meditation and a run and yoga and all those things. There's people that are overweight and eat Twinkies first thing in the morning. And even those are kind of habitual patterns that we have. It's their approach towards entrepreneurship is uniquely different in that way. So there's no specific template. Everyone's always searching for that magical template.
Yeah, there really isn't.
And what you have to do is find what's going to work for you. Where can you tap into your strengths and be someone unique and different, or create something that's unique and different from anybody else out there. So one common trait that you'll see with that kind of nobody does anything the same, most of the successful founders know what they're really good at. They found it.
Yeah.
And that could be outsourcing. That could be creativity. Gary Keller, founder of Keller Williams Homes, he realized there were certain things he was good at, but he also discovered there was things he was terrible at.
Yeah.
What made Keller Williams now the most successful real estate company in the world, the largest, is that he created a system that he'd have 6 people report to him. And that's the magic number, no more, no less. Because he knew that 6 was, if you had 3, that's not enough. I can't outsource all these things to just 3 people. 10 is too many. I can't impart my vision, my wisdom, my ideas with 10 people. So his magic number was 6. So each of these people really had these kind of methodologies that they found that worked for them. Red McCombs, the founder of Clear Channel, number 247 on the Forbes 400, filmed him 5 or 6 times. His mantra was, he's got from Spur, Texas, population 100, showed up at the University of Texas with a dime in his pocket, and he goes, Lyn, we're all given 24 hours on this earth. What you do with those 24 hours is up to you. And that's going to determine whether you're successful or not. And think about this. One of the richest guys in the world that had this simplistic approach towards life and this draw that makes you think he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but my goodness, he's spending time with you. And you realize that's a disguise, if anything. Or, Howard Schultz, who's this Italian-looking, tall, polished, slick-back hair.
Yeah.
He looks like the founder of Starbucks.
He does.
He is that. And he has this charisma, this je ne sais quoi, that his ability to passionately articulate a vision, describe that experience I referenced, is second to none. He's just one of the best people in the world to do that. Shows you how unique these individuals are. And yet they all have different formulas. They all have different methodologies and processes and ways that they approach success, ways that they think about how to grow and scale their company. And some of them pour everything into one thing. And they've got people like genius level of Elon Musk, who's doing 4 or 5 companies right now, some of the most pivotal companies in the history of mankind, in Tesla and in Starlink and in now his Neuralink with the mental system, the Boring Company. And of course, with I forget his other company. He's got so many, and look at him. and he is not the nicest person to work with. He yells and screams, and he forces everybody in his company to work ungodly hours. And Howard Schultz, the exact opposite of that. He gives people part-time, working 20 hours or more, full healthcare service, all because his father, when he was a young kid, got into a car accident. He was a delivery guy, got into a car accident. They didn't cover workman's comp, couldn't work. They had to move into the projects in New York City. And he never forgot that. His dad was humiliated because he couldn't take care of his family. And they had to become poor and impoverished because he couldn't get health care. So that led to him creating healthcare for part-time employees at Starbucks, even after over 20 years old, or over 20 hours a week. So I share those examples with you, not to kind of like tell their stories, but to answer your question that there isn't one way to do anything.
Right.
And also if there's one thing I believe, or multiple things that I think these founders have done, is they found what works for them, where they can excel at, or how to get people to excel that work underneath their umbrella. Whatever it is, they find it and they follow that, they pursue that passionately.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to, when you're talking about every entrepreneur has their own approach, and every story is unique. And, the story will determine not only, the brand and the position, but the culture, right? Like talking about Elon versus Schultz. And, your story is what will become your culture, right? Like Google, like everybody has their own culture, and it's based on and anchored in story. And so, let's maybe like talk about, and we've had this discussion, so this is not a trick question or anything, but like the top 3 tips, right? For those entrepreneurs and those founders who say to me, Casper, your whole storytelling thing is utter bullshit. I don't want it. Like, okay, founder, sir, here's how we're going to start to figure out what your story is. And I'm going to show you the value of the story and how to put it to work for you. 3 things that you think they must do. What are the 3 things you start with to tell a story?
First, they have to find those memorable moments in their life, those experiences that come to the surface whenever you're thinking back on your history. If that means writing down on a timeline of your life, where you're right before you launched your company, what are those moments of bliss, those aha moments, those catastrophes that put you on the path? First and foremost, that's what you got to do. Second thing you got to do is you've got to almost like when you're cooking a great sauce for a meal, you start out with a lot of stuff that you're putting in there, liquids and vegetables and spices, and a sauce gets better the more you cook it down. So you're trying to condense that, so things start evaporating, because remember this, people don't have a lot of time and they don't have a lot of patience. So you've got to make your story as short as possible. So by condensing it down, you're going to make that story better, more compelling, easier to remember, and easier to share.
Yeah.
So once you kind of start with those memorable moments, condense it down to just a few things you want to talk about, you want to tie it to an emotional bridge to the audience.
Yeah.
What is it that's is driving you to do what you're doing? The reason we tell stories is we're trying to move someone on an emotional level.
Yeah.
I've talked to neuroscientists, neurologists, psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists in the research for my book that taught me how stories work. And the one thing I've surmised after 10 years doing this research now is that the reason we'll tell stories is we're trying to reach someone on an emotional level, so that they will make a decision that supports us. So if you can tie your story to their emotions, then you're halfway there with your story.
Yeah. And I'm going to add one because, I'm a writer. You're a writer too. And I think one of the things that gets lost in, talking about the emotion and the journey and the experiences is, you really have to have a clarity of your story, right? Like you have to be clear with what it is, right? It's like, some startup, like, for example, when you pitch, right, before you launch a company, before you pitch anyone, before you do anything, like what I tell my startups, and this is part of storytelling, I think, is you need to be able to explain what this company does in 3 sentences or less, right? And until you can get it that concise, otherwise, you've had startups pitch, like, it's like, well, we do this and it's all this and here's our that. Like, it has to be, I do this, and Howard Schultz, I make coffee and serve it in a cafe environment. Like, it's so crystal clear that I think that's really important. Do you agree? Like, I just took a lot of time just like getting to the point, but
yes, because what you're trying to do as a founder when you're articulating your story to someone is that you're trying to honor their attention.
Yeah.
They've given you the podium, the platform, the meeting. And you want to respect that by honoring that attention and not just blabbering and vomiting out your
Right.
life's journey.
Right.
And I remember something specifically that Bert Jacobs said, the founder of Life is Good. He goes, if you can't articulate it for a second grader to understand it,
Yep.
it's not
That's
clear enough.
exactly right.
And that's
Yeah.
your goal. You want to be able to find some grade schoolers to hear your story. And if they understand it, makes them interesting, then you're there. At least you've got it to that level. So you always have to be work on simplifying it, condensing it down, getting that clarity that you speak of so that they understand it and they can retell it back to you.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll stay with them. They're
Yeah.
going to remember.
Like
and then
the stories
share it with
that you
somebody
and I remember, like we remember them because they're clear, they're visual, right? There's a visual part of the storytelling. And, so I really do appreciate your time. And I want to take a couple of moments so we can talk about Share Snacks right here. And your role with, you're a creator. You wrote this book. You've helped hundreds of founders and entrepreneurs, and you've told the stories of thousands. You've raised millions of dollars for startups. You have had a catastrophic cash burn experience in your early career. And now you're doing like this tangible, non-digitized snack. So talk about your role with this, the launch of it, and kind of the creative market position that you guys are taking with this product.
Being in Austin, we have a lot of consumer packaged goods companies, and the CPG is the term that goes with it. And I've watched Tito's explode in front of me. I watched Clayton Christopher launch Sweet Leaf Tea and then Deep Eddy Vodka. And now we have, Whole Foods is based here, and I filmed the founder of Whole Foods and a variety of other these consumer goods companies. And when I met the original founder of Share, I was like, this is a great product with some incredible branding. And his mission to really change sustainability as we know it for consumer packaged goods, I'm like, this is something I could get behind because great product, great partner, great opportunity, great branding, and then a mission that aligned with internally something I wanted to do in life was help to save the planet. And it was something where I started helping him with his story and his pitch initially, and then over the next couple of years, it turned into now I'm an owner in the company with him. So I'm kind of like co-founder, and he's the founder. He's done everything to kind of get it to where it's at. But I saw an opportunity to create the Yeti of snacks. Yeah. Because Yeti is also based here in Austin, and they took kind of a lame industry, or I should say a non-innovative industry in coolers, led by two brands. Reimagined the whole thing. And they started out with a $300 cooler when the average cooler at the time was $30. A 10 times increase in the price. Yeah. And everyone said they're going to fail miserably. Who's going to pay $300 for a cooler? Yeah. Turns out there was a lot of people. Yeah, I did. I love my Yeti. That took pride in a product that would protect their beer or their bait. Or their lunch, that they would put the sticker on the back of their truck if you're a fly fisherman or a hunter or someone that loves the outdoors or you just love cool things. Yeah. And they created this mystique, this brand, this je ne sais quoi around a cooler. Right. And but they also tell stories. Like they have a whole media, they have their own magazine. But before they started that, they didn't. That came after. That came after the Capitol. But what they did do in the early days was they told stories to the people that were going to buy them. It says, you take this cooler, you can keep your lunch for a week. It's going to keep your bait frozen for 10 days. You're going to be able to drop it from the side of a cliff, and it's still going to be there when it's done. So I watched them build that brand here in Austin as well. And when I saw Share, we want to be the Yeti of snacks. Right. It's kind of like our famous saying is, if Yeti and Patagonia had a love child, it would be Share Snacks. And it was in that kind of opportunity to craft a brand that could have a significant impact like Patagonia does on sustainability and conservation, and yet create a product that you as a healthy, wellness-focused individual would love. Not only be good for you, but would love. You'd be like, oh my God, this product's amazing. That's where I wanted to gravitate and help tell the story. So my title is Chief Story Officer. And I really believe one of the most important things we have to do for our brand in a very competitive space is tell great stories about why this is special, why you love it, why a hunter's going to love it, why an athlete's going to love it, why a mom with her 2 kids that wants them to eat healthy, nutritious snacks instead of Doritos or sugar and laced candy. Here's something you can turn to that tastes good, is good for you, and good for the planet.
Okay, so just one thing on share. You know what would make it even better?
Ooh, I like that.
No coconut. You know that though, right? Because I sit there at my
Yes,
desk and I have
you do.
to pick the coconut pieces out, and then at the end of the day, I count the coconut pieces. Like I've turned it into, I've gamified eating.
Put it this way,
Share.
I do demo samplings about twice a month in the stores, Whole Foods, Central Markets, and other places. And there's always somebody who's like, can you get rid of the almonds?
Yeah.
Can you get rid of the chocolate? Can you get rid of the coconut?
No, it's just the coconut. That's
So,
all.
okay,
Like, that's
well,
the only thing.
It's on the wish
Perfect.
list. We'll see. My business partner, Peter, he wants it to make someone can create their own trail
Yes,
mix,
you can make
things
your
like
own.
that. I'm not sure if we'll ever get there, but that's
I don't think I
want.
want to make my own. I want it to be made for me, but without coconut.
Okay, well, it's on the list. But
All right, just
you're not the only one. There's
okay.
others with
I
you
know
on
there's a
that, but-
community of us. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to sit here with me again, and let's talk about storytelling and founders and challenges and writing.
And congratulations on the podcast for Busy. Can't
Thank
wait
you.
to see
Yeah.
this come out and see the other
We're gonna
people.
kick ass.